So who was Ezra Pound? Most people probably don't know much about Ezra Pound and the controversy that he got into with the American government. So what I wanted to do is explain a little bit about him, his past, and why was born in the 1800s, that is 1885. Eventually died in 1972. He was apparently a very smart student, and he moved from being out in the middle of nowhere. He was born in the state of Idaho, out in the boonies, I would consider, and eventually had the opportunity to be with what I call great poets or great writers at his time. And those writers were T.S. Eliot, Ernest Hemingway, and James Joyce. So let's explain some things about Ezra Pound. He's what we would consider a modernist poet. I have not read too much of his poetry. I'm not a poet fan, but that's not the reason why I'm doing this particular video. I'm doing this video simply because of what he stood for and what happened to him. So let's get into that. Ezra Pound had influence, and eventually he moved to England and was part of the what I call modernist poetry, and he associated with what I call the men that I've already spoken about. He was there for a few years and got what I call really upset with what was going on in the World War I situation. He felt that basically he just got angry about the carnage of World War I, and he blamed the West, the financial capitalists at that time, with what he called usury. And in 1924 he moved to Italy and began to promote theories about economics. He was not in favor of communism, and he was not in favor of capitalism. He was more in favor with what I call fascism. He pushed a system that we would call social credit. I think that's what we're seeing today. I'm not wanting to get in this issue with his economic situation. Part of the reason why I'm doing this video with him is because of his stand and what he saw, what was going on. And he actually was an American expatriate that moved to Italy in 1924. And through the 30s and 40s, he was promoting a different type of economic theory, such as social credit. And this got him in trouble. And more than that, he got involved on producing what I would call radio programs in Italy. I doubt 99 out of 100 people even know who this guy is. I really do. And he criticized what was occurring even in Italy. He was what we would call paid radio broadcasts. I don't know if that's true for the Italian government. And then he began to be very vicious in his attacks towards the United States, and especially with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and also with the Jews. When the American forces eventually were successful to win their African campaign with the British, they moved to attack Sicily, and then eventually to attack the Italian coast and to move upward from the southern part of Europe. And with this happening, eventually they got to the area where Ezra Pound was, and arrested him and charged him for treason. And what took place later is pretty drastic. He was not only charged with treason, but he was thrown in a U.S. military camp in Pisa, Italy. And that meant he was, at one point, he was put out into a steel cage like a monkey, for over 3 weeks. And he was considered unfit to serve, unfit to stand trial. Now, some people would say, well, he got his just, such and such. No, he didn't. I want to explain more about it. After he was not unfit to stand trial, he was taken to St. Elizabeth's Psychiatric Hospital in Washington, D.C., and actually spent 12 years of his life there. And he was eventually, his people like who his friends were in the Poets Society kept putting pressure on the government to release him, and finally they did release him. And he was released and eventually passed away in 1972. But the people like T.S. Eliot and James Joyce and others put pressure on the American government to release him. They had no reason to hold him. That was his opinions. That was his free speech. I don't agree with fascism, but I don't agree with communism, and I don't exactly agree with capitalism these days neither. Capitalism has good things in some ways, but we're seeing the eroding of those freedoms we think are freedoms that are taking place here in this country. So this was 12 years. So this was basically, I think he got out late 1950s. And then eventually died. So we were talking about he lived to be another 12 to 13 years. His wife was Dorothy Shakespeare. He met in England. He married her, and she took care of him while he was at St. Elizabeth Psychiatric Hospital. Now I'm going to be straightforward with you, and you say, well, big deal, Brent. Not a, No, I do believe it's a big deal because it shows, even in the past, how our government was so corrupt that it would not allow those to even have people to even have free speech in a foreign country. And they saw him as a threat, and I don't know how they could see him as a threat, but that's what they saw him as. And Ezra Pound was seen simply as a traitor. So in reality, he didn't have really freedom of speech, did he? You see, this is something that people don't understand here in this country, is that you have freedom of speech until you, so to speak, speak out against the government or seem to be a threat. I mean, the threat part simply is having either influential friends or having money or whatever you want to call it, to the point simply is that he's a threat. And being sent in a psychiatric hospital is what I would call simply is that's for the birds. That was just an excuse for them to mess with him, cause him more depression probably, such and such. So most people don't know anything about him because we're not taught about him. He was never given any type of awards, as far as I remember. He was given a prize, I think, in 1949 by the Library of Congress. But there was controversy because simply of who he was and what he spoke out against. He was released, actually, I told you 59, it's actually 58. So, and then he went back. He went back to Italy. He lived the rest of his life in Italy till 1972. He's is considered not only what we call a moderate poetry, but he borrowed certain themes from those in the past. And he had written a poem, I think it was, to be approximately, I think it's 800 pages, if I'm correct. And that was, wow, when you think about that. But not only just simply is that, it's based upon what is the group he talked about? Based upon somewhat with music and rhyming type of thing, what he did, and stressing precision and economic, what we call the language. And so he had enormous influence with T.S. Eliot and Ernest Hemingway and James Joyce. So what I mean by that simply is he was working in England and writing for a magazine and from America, several of them. And he's the one who actually discovered these men and then promoted them. So Ernest Hemingway and T.S. Eliot and James Joyce are all what we call, he was responsible for other people too, but these are the three major ones that he was responsible in finding out about, because he's the one who brought forth their poetry and allowed people to read their poetry, and that allowed them to be successful, especially T.S. Eliot and Ernest Hemingway. And I believe I used to have some information even far more about Ezra Pound, but that information is gone now on YouTube. Not on YouTube, but actually on the internet. I can't find anything about more of what took place with Ezra Pound. And that bothers me, because that means simply is that they're eliminating information on the internet about this gentleman. So, I gather this is also to do with, since he attacked Franklin Delano Roosevelt, this was a personal attack upon him also. So Roosevelt didn't like to that, and I guess what he decided was to say, I'll just keep this guy's mouth shut. So just wanted to share with you that. Hopefully this makes some sense to you. If anyone has got more material, I would like to know more of it if I could. And I appreciate you listening. You take care. Thank you.